We have a special Gen Z episode right now, talking with artist, world builder, entrepreneur, Sam Spratt, who has a very exciting project that is in motion as we speak. We're not going to talk about that much, but I do want to ask you a couple of questions. But I first wanted to know, in all of your history of life, what was your worst job?
I don't think anyone who has been willing to pay me to draw pictures is a bad job. I don't think I could point to anything that I would complain about.
You didn't work at a 7-Eleven or...
As long as I've been scouring the scraps that I could, even during the hungriest days, I was tangentially connected to making art in some capacity.
When we think about that, I was wondering how far back you remember noticing that you had some artistic talent, and what was that reveal like for you?
Oddly enough, more recently, I think as you go along, you build up these stories of epochs of your life for yourself, of maybe how capable, how much this was a part of your life at various points. And for me, art school was one of the biggest turning points. And I was a very bad student all growing up, very distracted, very poor grades. Art school is not that hard to get into. They are happy to take prospective artists' dreams and have them pay tuition. But I was dating a girl in high school, and she wanted to become a fashion designer. So she knew her dream, and I kind of just followed her there. And we broke up before the summer school even began, but I took to it. So for a while, that was my narrative. That was my starting point. But my parents moved a bit, and in the process of moving, they surfaced things, all the little things they had hoarded away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're really paying attention, you can see we're kind of genetically baked in out of the gate. I was in denial of the story for a long time, but if you look, you can see these like little fragments in a 3-year-old's drawing. They're present. And even if I didn't have any kind of like concrete direction or aspiration to want to be an artist until much later, I think it was all set in motion, probably at conception.
My guess is if I was able to see your youth, that we would find ways that you were being artistic and bring creativity to your life. And I just wondered, were you into music? Were you into fashion? Were you into ways that sort of allowed a creative brain to start to take shape?
I think the closest that when I look back that I can connect to this moment now is in high school, we had to take a mandatory, you call it like a creative practice class, and I took drafting. And so we designed these blueprints to houses. And I remember, for such a rigid practice that focuses on kind of mathematically correct design, square edges, everything kind of perfectly lining up and into each other, I had rather bizarre house plans. And so I wanted to be an architect for like half a second from that. But I think architecture, planning, the construction of systems ended up baking in once I had, we'll call it the bare bones abilities of a painter later on in life.
What were the things you were into as a high school kid?
The illusion of feeling like a punk rocker, I would say.
Shaved head, mohawk, something.
Yeah, similar. Yeah. Swept aside.
Right.
Yeah.
Henry Rollins playing somewhere.
Yeah.
So there's a counterculture sort of vibe that was probably...
I would say the falsest, most suburban version of wanting to be involved in counterculture. Yeah.
That sounds like American punk rock. So
there you go.
Yeah. And then you end up at SCAD,
Yep.
which sounds like chasing a potential relationship, and then you sort of start to find yourself there. Was there part of the practice at SCAD that you took to? Because I think we've talked in the past, and it sounds like there's a moment where it starts to turn.
Day one, it started to turn because you spend your whole life sort of being demonized for your poor output. So it's a fair demonization in your classes, history, math, anything like that. And so the first time I show up to a class and I see a bunch of kids gathered around a table and they all have an easel, pencil, and charcoal, and they're ready to go and draw the still life in front of them. And many of them had kind of hungered for this moment, and they practiced for this moment. But we were all tasked with doing the exact same thing. As we gathered around in a circle, I had the professor kind of narrate to all of us, and he said, "Look, right now you see the light coming through the windows. The windows are dusty. There's kind of like chalk in the air. There's sort of a thick atmosphere to it all. It's this wood plinth covered in paper bags." Said, "You're going to draw these, but I don't want you to think about the edges or the lines. I don't even really want you to think about the fact that they're paper bags. I just want you to see this as light is coming in and it is bouncing around. And whatever's in front of you is just light at a lot of different angles. Try to find the form." There's something about that, as absurd as it is, that was like a rewired version of being taught something that was never spoken in the English class, never spoken in the drafting class, but when rearranged and configured as that kind of direction, that made sense to me. And then when you put it also against the fact that there was 20 other kids gathered around and we were all pointed the exact same thing, I became very hungry to want to learn how to do that one very silly task of drawing a paper bag well. Because at the beginning, I was very poor at it relative to that hierarchy, and there was something very tangible, different than a grade, of slowly honing, going back to my dorm, buying a bunch of paper bags, crinkling them up in different directions, arranging them here or there, having a lamp on one, window on another, and trying and seeing the same thing that if you just shift around how the light hits it, you can get better at understanding what it's pointed at.
Does it lead to the idea of, do you have kind of an obsessive personality of, I see this bag, I need to be able to draw it now in all these ways, and that's part of your practice of learning, or are you someone who's like, I know when it's done and I can put this away and on to the next thing that might inspire you for a week or two?
I would say the former, most likely. I over here, Rachel and I kind of refer to it as noodling, where no matter what I'm pointed at, I have a deep kind of guttural desire to make sure that I get whatever is in the system out of me before I move on to the next thing. And I think until it's at a point where I put as much love, time, and attention into it that it deserves, and then I also get sick of it a little bit in the process, and then get to the other side of that and love it again, then it's not complete. Like every time I do any kind of one of these endeavors, Monument Game, Masquerade, anything like that, I think it's a little bit of like an exorcism. You got to get it out of you.
Yeah, when I had my creative agency, people would say to me, "What was your favorite campaign you ever worked on?" Mm-hmm. And I would often say the next one, because I was so sick of the thing we had just spent 3 months building or a year building. I think that's common. I'm wondering about your routine. Are you someone who's, you wake up and for 4 hours you do this and then you do other things? Are you more freewheeling? What's the day in the life at the Spratt household?
Well, it's changed a lot since having my daughter.
Yeah.
But I would say ritual has always been a key part of this, where I will go through what I would refer to as periods of expansion and exertion, as well as retraction, where when I am in the expansion, the exertion, I am waking up, I am caffeinating, and I am flooring it and working pretty much until I sleep. So in some capacity, that could be drawing, that could be painting, that could be connecting one node to the next, that could be working on the tiniest little element of the design or the biggest picture that's writing, so on and so forth. I'll often write before I go to bed or in the early hours in the morning. And then in the retraction periods, it's almost like regressing in on myself. Like it's the absolute inverse. It's the non-workaholic. It's being like a tiny little teenage boy and just taking in the world and being a bit of a sloth, and then feeling the patheticness of that, and then needing to like usher it out and spin it back up. But it usually works in one of those two cadences.
Tell me about your Tumblr account.
Sure. So back, let's see, this must have been 2011-ish. I was out of school and I was getting my first job at Gawker as a staffed illustrator. And along concurrently, I opened a Tumblr account to try to share what I would consider to be largely pop culture art. Almost like
Your own or others?
my own. So I would, in the same way as an artist might make a Pepe drawing or some kind of echo of a meme. Now this was sort of the like early pop culture version of that, and just kind of shared culture, shared pop culture, I should say. And I would contribute pieces of art as it related to celebrity or television, film, or fiction, anything like that. And slowly started amassing a small group of people that would follow my work. They would buy my prints, they would share it, and I would run little contests to give it out. And they became kind of like the social backbone while I had my first job to be this like first metric of, I would call it, I don't know if like success is the right word, but a metric where a number was associated with, say, a company that might want to hire me, and they would say, "Oh, he has this reach to this thing," and so it was my first exposure to having many people just sort of passively support would snowball and goop and slip into someone being willing to hire me.
And I mean, when I was researching, you had, I think it was like 66,000 people following you. So it wasn't that small a group, at least from what the internet tells me. Towards the end, sure. The page doesn't seem to be up anymore, but a lot of the art still exists on other people's Tumblrs. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's thousands of people referencing your work on Tumblr, and then which seem to go to Reddit and Instagram and all the other places. So was that your first also sort of touch of what it means to create a community around you?
I did not have the wherewithal to understand that's what was happening. I mostly just saw it as I am not working purely in isolation. I'm connected to a networked existence of humanity, and there are other people that are pointed at even the silliest of interests that I have as well. And if I can point my pen or my paintbrush or anything at that it might hold substance or value, like that was my first taste of feeling like to be an artist on the internet is really to find a very, very, very specific form of culture and try to be useful to it.
A lot of the work, I think, from that period, because I looked at a lot, it still has a very kind of painterly artistic style, which I think is very much you, but was rendered utilizing technology, Wacom tablets, etc. So I guess when you look at your career today, like, do you consider yourself a digital artist, an artist, a crypto artist? Like, what genre do you put yourself in?
Just an artist. I think the longer I've been doing it, the less the tool or extra title or generational or genre definition becomes helpful or useful. Like I often actually find it to be more of a trap than anything, or a limitation. When I started out, I referred to myself as an illustrator. There are specific scopes of things that an illustrator does versus a painter, and there's things that at its core, as the story I've been telling has evolved to not just include imagery, but also include the social components and market components. It evolves into this like labyrinthian sprawl, like it's a bit of a system, if anything. And so, I don't know, putting a bucket like digital artist or crypto artist would be that feels a little too tiny or too constraining for myself.
Do you think crypto art is a movement?
Yeah, I'm sure. There's a name and a title for just about anything if you want to slap it on there. But I think within the genre that some might associate crypto art within, There are artists that slip all over the place in and out of the tool that they use, and then there are some that like to live within the tool.
I think about when we talk to like Eric Calderon, who really likes to consider himself to some degree a crypto artist,
Sure.
which then got him into obviously a very successful career, both entrepreneurially and digitally. But I wonder, like, when I think of the span of art movements tend to live 15 years, 20 years. If you're lucky with something like surrealism, maybe it's 30 or 40 years, but they're somewhat finite in the way people look at them.
Sure.
And so I kind of wonder about, because your work is on chain, but it doesn't look like a normal NFT project. If you're talking to a young artist today, do you recommend to them that what sort of crypto art could be limiting?
I don't think I would ever begin with advice like that. I don't think that's like helpful to any artist starting out. I think just learning your practice and seeing what's inside of you and what you can conjure out of yourself, what box that temporarily fits in is almost not even up to you in my eyes. I like to think that there are stories and feelings and things that are worth being told, that if you were to take the technology used to tell it and replace it with something 500 years in the past, or what I'm using now, or 500 years from the future, there's a nugget of truth worth telling in it either way. That's the goal. The tools, just they're a means to tell the story.
I agree. I think that while I'm sure, are very competent at sketching and at painting, etc., you seem to have made your career and your name in a digital format. Mm-hmm. And I think we are living in a time, and we're going to sort of look at some of your recent work, especially with AI, that really merges the artist and technology. But I guess I wonder if is there a shyness about wanting to embrace technology as a key feature of your art?
I don't know that I would call it shyness. I just see it as referring to these things as tools or technology it's almost like in denial of human evolution. Like, these are just ways which we interface. These are ways to communicate. These are the binary that may seem there, that might separate physical or digital. It's getting slipperier, blurrier every day. It will only accelerate and become blurry over time. And so might as well like exist to translate the blur and try to slip in and outside of that, rather than say, I am solely in this camp. There are things from our past that are worth preserving, and there are things worth letting go. But making things digitally, whether it is with digital paint, with code, with AI, or anything like that, it's just a way to extend ourselves. Like, I can feel the network coming, mm-hmm. Like I'm slipping right into it. So are you. How do we use it?
So 11 years ago, you gave a talk at the Apple Store, merging art and technology, September 9th, 2014. If you looked at the content of that talk, is that, would you see yourself today? Or if you went back to hear yourself, would you say, oh, I only got, 30% of that right?
I remember that talk, and I think there is the tiniest nugget that was touched in it that I still hold on to today, which is just because we're using computers and they are these objects of black glass and metal and silicon and plastic, that there's something rather nice about not seeing them as they have to be the cold and synthetic environment that you grow up thinking a computer is. There's warmth in there, there's texture in there. And maybe back then that talk may have focused on something like leaving in a mistake, not hitting the undo command, building up layers on layers on layers. I think there's some little nugget in there that I haven't let go of, and a lot of building anything here is trying to touch the fringes of technology while leaving the mess of being a human in them.
Mm. I talk a lot about, and I've mentioned on our show before, I don't know if you've ever read the book Being Digital. by Nicholas Negroponte. He was the head of the MIT Media Lab. And he wrote a book in like 98, 99 about what digital society is going to look like. And I remember reading it then, and I reread it recently. It's very short. And it's the kind of book that if you read it now, you're like, if I only had been paying attention, he outlined where we are. And you could have prospered from that, either just culturally in your career, as an investor, whatever you wanted to do. And so I wonder when you look at those moments, if your craft was almost pre-selected in some natural way to be right for the moments we're in. And if you feel a connection to being able to see a little farther ahead than maybe some other people do who maybe went to school with.
Learning to paint traditionally. So starting as an oil painter, studying old masters, and then picking up a Wacom tablet for the first time. Those things happening so close to one another in time made it, for me, more of a test. There's something magic in this. The tactility of the paint, even the smell of it, the mess of it, the permanence of it, that I treasure, that I value. And then there's something here that feels, this is how we are going to talk to each other. And this feels like it won't. So how do you take a little bit of the morality, the lessons, the values that the painters from 500 years ago that I'm studying and doing master copies of, and try to translate them into this space, onto this screen, into this tablet? And that's much of what Luci, my project, everything is how do you let time be slippery? How do you see it as we have behavior that has been largely unchained for 5,000, way beyond years, like still doing the same monkey shit again and again and again. But the truth in there has to get like retranslated. There's a story that we've been telling to ourselves, to each other, again and again and again and again. And as technology grows and our language vocabulary changes, our interest changes, we just have to like convert it, translate it, and try again and again and again. So it's like this authorless story that has to continue. So it's not that I had some kind of like vision by doing a digital painting back then and giving a talk at an Apple store that predicated this. It's more, I'm always fixated on how do you not be a Luddite, not worship nostalgia, but still see the past as something valuable that we shouldn't just constantly pretend like we're in a revolution.
I mean, I love that way of thinking, and I think that I'm very anti-nostalgia. Friends of mine are often accuse me of being not nostalgic enough, because I'm like, I don't want to talk about high school again. I don't want to talk about college. I want to think about what's going to come next, and I think that that's where it's exciting and uncomfortable. And I think that there's a lot of exciting and uncomfortable right now in this little corner of the art world that you exist in. And so I want to get there soon. But I want to talk about, you had a very successful career as an illustrator and being hired for commissions from very famous people and doing album covers and show packaging for shows and what a lot of people would love to think of their own careers at. Right? If they went to SCAD and came out as an illustrator, they looked at you and said, "This is what I want to do."
Sure.
And and I think it sounds like you spend a lot of time seeing that there's this new thing happening within the sort of blockchain-based art space. You wanted to make it your own, and you created sort of this world of Luci. Since the first time of seeing your work, I kept wondering how much of this was a retelling of man's origin story or a retelling of your own origin story. Because I see both in the work when you dive into it. So tell us a little bit about why that decision to kind of go to what felt like a primitive alternative universe in the work itself came. How did that come about?
Luci really came from this feeling at around when I turned 30, where most solid or seemingly solid bits of my life kind of fell out from underneath themselves. And I was existing in a rather pathetic zone, like in the aftermath, this kind of like wreckage of a bunch of relationships falling, grief, loss, and wondering, when I looked at my artistic practice that you alluded to was by some metrics successful, why did I feel so detached from it? Why did it like kind of break my heart to look at these album covers that, were they paid me well, they gave me a little bit of notoriety, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and like why did it hurt looking at all that for that brief window of time while I was my most melodramatic self? And a lot of it was I felt in the act of trying to participate in what I would characterize as pop culture, I had largely dissociated while making a living. And I was plugged into the most vapid form of human feeling, like the most processed version of it. And I was contributing to it. And so when you have a moment where you're kind of like ripped out of that, for me, it felt like it's not like I'm starting over. It's not just like I'm having some kind of like profound rebirth moment and I'll just get to start fresh and try a new chapter, all this. It's not like I'm a babe in the woods starting over in that sense. It's like I missed the whole point. It's like I missed not just the lessons in the classes or the lessons from my parents or the lessons from my brothers or my friends or the relationships. I missed every book. I missed every story. I missed all of human history. And when I looked at like what had given me meaning for 30 years of life, it felt very, very cold and empty. And I had gripped and grasped onto little of it, even though I had all the tools and ingredients to seize it. For me, it's like starting over as a species. So it is my story, but it's our story.
And, as we see in this piece behind, I mean, there's endless stories in it, and it feels like we're only beginning to go in there. Last time I was here, you were sort of talking about you've been training this tool, right, to be you, but you times 1,000. Yeah. And is that part of the reason of making it is that there's just too many stories to tell in this reimagination that you just want to have almost an endless sort of narrative that can go maybe even places you didn't imagine?
I think it has less to do with infinite stories so much as just exploring what it is to be human infinitely. And so if that manifests as...
It feels very multiverse when you say that.
I've been a painter my whole life. I've done this the whole time. And that's supposed to be special and distinct and separate from using something generative. And when I looked at the bulk of work that was crafted with AI, it was sliding right off me. It reminded me actually very much of like that moment of looking back at my life as an artist and the kind of like homogenous pop culture that I had been glommed into and partaken in. It slid off me in the same way. Why did it slide off me was the thing that I was really curious about asking. Can I play with this in a way where it's not here to make my life easier? I like noodling. I like putting all of my time in. I like kind of suffering, making art in some, weird way. But it's an undeniable force that feels inevitable in a way that you can't actually bottle back up. And it feels like it wasn't birthed by accident or by some like marvel, but rather the most natural pattern of us replicating and networking possible. Like it just feels like, even if I don't understand all the intricacies of the science that led us to this, the formation of it grows in the exact same way as the branches on the tree or the clouds in the sky or anything else. And so when you feel nature, when you feel God, the design of it all, kind of stitching it all together, it's hard to like run away from it. So I wanted to play with it. And what I realized in the process of working with these tools and breaking them down is I realized where I find very little value in them, but also what they can unlock in us if we give of ourselves to them. And so AI, generative work, it is used to dream whole worlds. And it will dream for us very easily. It will dream incredible things for us. But incredible is not really like my goal. My goal is to try to see what I have to leave behind. Like, what can I take out of me and put it in front of you? And what that means when you're trying to basically like clone and replicate yourself is you both surface what you're good at and what you're really bad at. And then how do you not let working with a machine smooth out your flaws, but you keep them there? And that's been most of my last 17 months, is making sure those things stay intact. So my level of fixation and flaw, noodling, architecting, all of this into there, I had to be able to kind of bend and break these things. And in the process, I had to give a lot more of myself than I ever would have thought I'd have to. And the end result is a node-based sprawl that is an echo of my process, but also an extension of it, where I am not trying to make something to dream for me. They are my dreams. Can they follow my instructions very rigidly, so that I don't have to be a manager of 1,000 people, because they just move where my hands move?
So you went from these beautiful one-of-ones, the Luci world, to the skulls, and there's 50 skulls. That feels like it took a generative approach, right? It was the same, I assume, base and different color palettes, and then were those hand created? Those were right. So not AI at that point.
No. At this point, I hadn't played with any of those tools at all. So there, it was all hand done. But at the same token, the skulls were inspired by a sense of we are all sharing a common husk. We rhyme with each other, but the only thing that separates us is, our little soul, our unique variable to contribute just this slight permutation. Some of that is aesthetic, some of that is more feeling. But the act of making those, the 50 skulls took me about 6 months to create, was maybe one little log point for me of, surely there must be a better way. Like, even though I enjoyed the act of making it, that there was some part of that task where the heart and soul of what the skulls were, and the connection to them being these free gifts given to the people that bid on my first pieces, when you have the system attached to them, baked in, when you have the sketch, when you have the design, what part of me moving my hand back and forth, which has defined my entire life, is additive, or is it actually just putting me into some kind of loop that is trapping me in a point of growth just to execute? Can I build tools for myself that let me jettison ideas faster to get and hone to the best form of it, even if it takes me just as long as I might take on a painting, that I don't get trapped in the sketch? To bridge to this, at about 4 months, I had all of this mapped out. Every system connected to it, the communal participatory system, the sketches, where every little story written out, where this person would flow into this, the pathways that one could take in life. And then I spent 7 to 8 months moving my hand back and forth. I love doing that. It's everything to me. It's been what I spend my whole life working on. But I don't think the 8 months doing that is what defines an artist.
Is that, that reminds me of, whether it's a Warhol or a Kastabi or Peter Max, any of these people who then end up having studios where really they're just at that point creative directors.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're just sort of saying, make this and make this. How does that make you feel? I mean, all your employees end up being you if this works, right? Which is kind of amazing. But is there some part of you that feels it also like slightly takes away the soul of what it is to slave over the Wacom and, make the work that you?
I would say I have just done the same amount of slaving away in a different form. There's no part of making this, as my wife would tell you, or any of the people that I have worked on this for the last 17 months, that I have somehow like abstracted away my life into something more efficient where some machine is working on me. This is the grimiest form of AI I could possibly show you. It is a rock grinding against a mainframe. It is not an elegant system at all. It is a pass.
So the work is still there.
It's all all of the neuroses and fixations and flaws are very present throughout, intentionally, but also like I don't think I could polish them out if I tried.
But like, I'm not saying Rachel would do this, but there's a world where you don't exist anymore.
Sure.
And Rachel presses a button and creates endless Sam Spratts once the system is done.
Yeah.
Does that make you uncomfortable, or is that actually part of the design?
If this reaches a level of sophistication where I have actually extracted myself that much that I can achieve some form of like artistic or immortality that isn't just a human centipede regurgitating back in on myself, that would be incredible to me. That sounds unbelievable. It sounds unbelievable.
So you go from Luci to these beautiful skulls. They achieve their own notoriety, to the gamification of the monument, which sort of relied on players. I was one of those players that created the next icon of the masks. So like, what is it about skulls, about masks, that also seems to be somewhat of a thread in your work also?
I think it is nice to have something where you can take it all off and be as you are. And that's where the PFP craze rose up, the digital identity rose up. But I think like that's most of what people struggle with their whole lives, is just seeing how much they can strip down and find the essence of what they are. And most of where we struggle along the way is where we can't. And so a mask is a fun way to provide an outlet to do that.
But is a mask to hide, or is a mask to reveal, I guess?
Up to the person. I don't think we need to get into our armchair psychology here.
Okay, so you've done one of ones. You had 50 masks, 256 players. 50 skulls, 256 players, 613 masks.
Yep.
Does the numerology mean anything?
Yeah.
Or is that public, or is that to be revealed?
That's for everyone to walk through themselves.
All right, so we have 613 masks coming.
Yeah.
I guess tell us a little bit about the game of the Masquerade.
Sure. So the Masquerade builds on a lot of the foundation that the Monument game set up. And in the Monument game, the main goal for me is I wanted to take this feeling I had in myself of wanting to tell one story that contained all stories, as many stories as I could find to place in it, and have them all weave together in a way, and to find a solution using technology to get people to slow down and actually digest it rather than scroll past it. To do that, we built an interface with Nifty Gateway to pan and zoom and get very close to it. And then we released an addition work called Player, where each one of those could leave a written observation that would be preserved at the coordinate and the written word, embedding and creating a link between a singular work that one person collects and 256 others, kind of folding inwards. And to create an incentive structure between those two layers, those skulls were the prize, the reward. So this outermost circle of the players competed to come one rung in to the skulls, to the council, all looking at and pointing their attention at this. It's a digital campfire to gather around, to party, to dance, to swap stories. Mm-hmm. But in making this, one of the things that I experienced in the aftermath was, well, I've had 256 people leave little pieces of themselves on top of my painting. So these are love letters, these are confessions, some are jokes, some are kind of cruel, some are really beautiful and profound. And it meant a lot to me to have all of that, because they represented just a very wide swath of people. But then they entered the market and people start trading them and swapping them. And so this thing that had a piece of them is now being traded for a small profit. And their words are going to someone else who wants to collect my work, but their words stay with this forever. And so you watch these things move and shift around. There's a good chunk. They're not parting ways with that. They're holding that very near, dear, and close. You call them true believers, people they're in it with me for whatever this story may become. And then you have the people that flip it for a little profit, discardable, disposable. But then you got everyone in between. gradations of people that may hold it for a long time or short time, and even people that are loud about believing in it and sell into the fervor that they create. And witnessing that all around this, I saw that this painting, which is me looking out and saying, here's all the paths that we can take. Rachel, here's every one of these routes we can go, all the different kinds of little stories and moments where we could slip or fall or triumph or wander or loop back in on ourselves, but we can go in all of them. And here's all the little people and characters that are there along the way that we're going to collide with. Well, we collided with them. By making this, they came very close. So the Masquerade is inspired by what happens when all the people that are far away are now close to you. What do they all want?
I guess, like, tell us, I guess, a bit more how the new players get involved.
So there's a few layers to this. One, all of the players from the Monument game will receive a mask to come in and participate in the Masquerade. But I've also given each of them a responsibility to invite and curate someone to basically extend a guest spot for them to collect and purchase, and decentralizing a bit who else comes into my ecosystem. And once the guest list is set, it's in motion as we speak right now, everyone being invited in, those 613 people will come on in, and they will be partaking in the Masquerade in 3 phases. So the first phase is going to feel very similar to the Monument game. It's a written observation. You place a coordinate atop this work, and you leave a little bit of yourself behind. But the second phase is really trying to acknowledge what the first phase was, which that observation in my book was creation. It was a creative writing exercise at the minimum, but some people made audio logs and blockchain-based games. Like it took many different forms. It was a creative endeavor on top of a creation. And so the second phase for me is really what making all of this has been, which is the bigger the story has become and the more systems have been kind of spread out and fractalized from there, the more my creations, in order to find their best forms, I bump them up against the people that I know, trust, and love, and build things with. And so we destroy together. By discussing, we destroy. And so that next phase echoes the system of creation. It is the participation demands destruction, discourse. So all of the people that maybe in Monument game, I had a conversation between me and them, me and you, but it was a little bit of like a one-way street. Well, what happens if now suddenly everyone looking at the same areas is now in conversation with one another? And through that collision, whether that is being a good guide to one another, whether you're kind, whether you're coddling, whether you're a troll and an asshole, whatever that may be, all of that is taken in. And then each of us as individuals, after we create alone, destroy together, we come back in and we balance and we revise and we leave an addendum. What do we have to say after we have taken in everyone else? This is the active discourse, but it's really inspired by Midrash. It's inspired by basically breaking down any ancient text, but in this case, we're referring to the Old Testament. And if you look at the scripture and go line by line, what's left behind is a multi-century conversation between scholars. And you leave in every question, every argument along the way, rather than pointing at this is the answer, this is what this one means. And it is through leaving behind this ledger of interpretation that you enter the picture, not with gospel, but with your own questions to find your own answers.
So I guess you started by just saying, I'm an artist, and these technologies are just a way for me to do my work. Yeah. It sounds like you're also a world builder, a game designer, a god in the world you're creating, because you get to control the rules.
Sure.
And you and I talked about this a while ago, but crypto is very lawless, and I think it's one of the biggest complaints people have. We're seeing this every day in the meme coin universe. People we know are emotionally being challenged to how do they keep their identity in a world where everything has been financialized.
Yeah.
And, and I shared with you, I had one of your pieces stolen from me at a time of, being overly tired and clicking a wrong button, as these things happen. And I sort of challenged you not to say, help me out. I actually challenged you to say, how do you as an artist deal with that? Because I think of it, hey, I left a point on that monument, or that's the building over there, that was very personal and was mine. And then it goes to somebody else, who then goes to somebody else. I only found out today it landed in someone we both know's pocket. Even though, I took all of the precautions one can take, all the actions one can take of saying, hey, this is a stolen piece, this and that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did before I came here, I was like, I want to know how many other artists, not of current, but how did artists that we all look up to deal with interacting with elements they don't want to?
Yeah.
Right. So you can look at someone like Ai Weiwei, who says, I will not sell or allow my work to be collected by an organization that I believe is corrupt. Right. Or Chuck Close, who said, I'm going to choose the people who are allowed to purchase my work. Or I think Basquiat was very careful who he took money from as a patron. And I sort of wondered to you to say, hey, you have this game dynamic, which is based on the fact that collection and participation is rewarded as being part of a community.
Yeah.
And yet, so you have the means to say, I don't want to honor the people who are stealing my work. Sure. That are, and there's a record, right? A very permanent record there. So I guess I was just wondering, because I think part of the artist's opportunity is to say, I want some control over how my work is seen, is processed, is digested. You can't sell it on the secondary market. You can't control that, but you can control the benefits of a secondary market in that way. So, I remember when this happened to me, there was a couple of very valuable, I think it was two skulls, and another player got stolen, I think 2 days before or 3 days, probably the same people in the end. I don't know if that's the case. A lot of it ended up in a similar wallet. So it just made me wonder, though, why should crypto artists, artists who are playing in crypto, have to play the game of also the over financialization and, frankly, a lot of the bad actors that are in this space? Is that a responsibility that the artist should take on, or is the artist saying, I'm going to wash my hands of what happens once it leaves my control?
I think there's a few things at play here. Let's talk a little bit about the skulls, for example. So the skulls began as free gifts, but they were not airdrops. I didn't take anyone that bid on my first pieces and just send it to them. I spent 6 months making them, and then asked for a digital handshake to come to my site and claim it, link your wallet, and then I would give it to you. And in that process, a little bit of a social contract got built too, that as the story grows and the people connected to it, and potentially some of the benefits that go to those people along the way are constructed and thought about, that there is a human component where we're constantly doing digital handshakes. For example, the players that are now able to claim a free mask, we got 97% of those 256 people to come in, custody, claim, and receive. Wonderful. All the people that didn't, those are the rules. I have created as generous of a system as I know how to make, without seeing it as I am just going to rain down stuff randomly to people who aren't paying attention. Because I think most of the best friendships and relationships that I have in my life are attentive. There's a sacrifice, there's a give, there's a take. I made the monument game. I put a year of my life into crafting the system around it, creating a framework around it, a network of people that drew close to it to then invite and extend to you. And so you were a player in this. You left behind one of the, if not my literal favorite observations. It's something that even though it's been stolen from you, I still get your words, and it goes with my painting for the rest of my life, wherever I go, wherever this lives. And in it was a rarity. It was an oddity, because in those words that you contributed, it was not trying to pat my back. It was not trying to win the game by flattery. It was almost like a warning. It was, you're playing with fire. And I greatly appreciate that. That's not a thing that I shy away from. And so I view that as this link between us that now lives and preserved in this. And even when I say this is just the physical manifestation of the real this, which is in code.
Mm-hmm.
You lost this player trying to claim Pengu.
Totally. 100%.
So for me, if self-sovereignty is truly self-sovereignty, even though I absolutely adore you, I think you're a phenomenal human. If there was anyone I would want to make an exception for, to make sure that that record, this thing, this conversation we've had with one another stays with us and genuinely with us, all the conversations took place. I routed around my friends, talked to Benny. How do we get this back? What can we do? Should I buy it? And then you go down this other rabbit hole. Well, if I'm buying work for my friends who have their work stolen, trying to claim Pudgy Penguin coin, then I put a target on not just my back, but all of my collectors' back. Right? And so it just keeps going. You pull all these threads. And at the end of the day, I have to basically say, wherever this goes, the benefit has to go with it. And so it is on you and it is on them. And the best I can do is create these checkpoints along the way of digital handshakes, where anyone who commits the worst of this, there's a little bit of a barrier where they have to admit, they have to say, maybe I wasn't the first person to get this, but I wasn't the one to take it. And I want it back, and I want to be a part of this. And in that case, someone we both know has it. And so he's in. But those skulls that were stolen, I do not yet know who they are. The skulls are also entitled to masks. They are not receiving a mask unless I know who they are. This is a tight circle of people. They deserve to have that check. If they do, even though they're stolen, even though who they are stolen from is someone I genuinely care about, at a certain point, you have to just see it as, this is the rules of self-sovereignty. This is what it is to hold the mantle of responsibility around the freedom to transact.
It's one thing to say, hey, my wallet got hacked and someone took $50,000 of my Trump token that I had bought for $200 and now it's 50,000 and I lost out, right? Like,
sure,
but even that, is part of the problem still within this ecosystem. I guess I look at art differently because I don't look at it through the lens of the financialization. Most of the art I bought in my life, and I bought a lot of it, I still have, right? Yeah. And I'm not someone who flips, but I do think that's because I have a relationship with the work, and which doesn't mean someone couldn't come into my apartment and steal something, right? That could happen.
Yeah.
And someone else would probably buy that work. I think it's just interesting to have the paradigm of being the artist who now knows people, and most of the people I think probably who are getting, it's not like you're releasing 10,000 PFPs, right? You have a relationship with these people. And so it just does make me wonder if there is a responsibility to the artist to say, I still want to protect the integrity of my work. Not to say the work changes when that happens, but if half of your skulls got stolen, at some point, would you feel the connection to those skulls in the same way? Or is there an opportunity to say, the blockchain actually allows some transparency that means we can cure some of those ills?
But on a just technical level, how do you propose curing those ills? Like the things that I have created, let's say they are taken, and I've created enough of a barrier that the thief can't come in and participate in the rest of what I do. Even look at those stolen skulls. There are many people that have been trying to get a skull and they have not bought the stolen ones. That's a social contract that a collective has come to agreement on. But the moment, in my view, that I say, this is now off the table, that I am creating some kind of like moral technological line that like this is verboten, like this will never be used again. I think it's exercising a form of power that is not in the cadence that humans are trending towards. Like remove crypto from it at all. Like at any step of human growth, it's like you are coming to terms that you have agency. you have to take responsibility for things. That's for me, like all of the moments of tragedy or grief that I was talking about earlier, all of those were my fault. Like I did that for myself.
Of course.
And the only time something started bubbling up and trending in a positive direction in my life is when my most embarrassing things became things that I had to hold myself to account about. And so I don't think it's a crypto ideology thing at all. I think it's really just every person.
But Sam, sorry to stop you, but when Neil Young says to a political candidate, "You cannot use my song on your campaign trail,"
sure,
they are exerting control over their work.
Sure.
And so I hear you, and I think that it's we're not going to answer this, so I think it's fine to let it lie. But I do think that there is something about that could be seen, not from your perspective, because I don't think it's on you, that it enables a bad actor to say, well, if I still get the benefits anyway, then I can take advantage of the system. Because the fact is, especially with AI and all the things coming, we're about to see the work, that there's going to be more and more opportunities for people who are just always going to be less advanced technologically than the people trying to extract from them to be extracted. And so,
I think you're just describing human nature.
For sure.
I don't. I think if you are trying to design a system that is in opposition to how people actually operate, it can be preserved for a time, but we will find a way. They will always find a way. The people that would do this will find a way. And so you have to frame it less as how do I cater and construct my system around my enemies or villains or something like that, and more, how do I build a strong enough group around me that they care and take the precautions to hold it safe and preserve it, not just for themselves, but for each other.
Yes. I still think Soho House gets to revoke your membership. And so, so I only say that in I think that the social contract is one that is still very malleable, and something that we should be looking at. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up this part of the conversation and do a quick little exploration of the universe of AI that Sam has created, especially the 1,000 other Sam Spratts that live inside the computer over there. So, Sam, this is the 1,000 Hands of Sam Spratt laid out in an amazing interface. Tell us a little bit what's going on here.
Sure. So this is what I've affectionately dubbed the mask maker. And basically what you're seeing here is a mess, a very organized mess that began with just a few nodes linking and connecting to one another, and over time became something that is a hybrid extension of myself. So in it includes sculpture, it includes drawing, painting, it includes AI models that are trained on various stages of what I do. So that ranges from the shape of a mask, its contours, its edges, its depths, as well as down into my brushwork, my color palette, so on and so forth. Even the construction of any prompting associated is trained on all of my poetry and my writing. And more or less what you're seeing up here is a color wheel, which our masks are divided up into, and then categories of written descriptions of many things within a human ecosystem, a human jungle, that are representative of, say, the sunlight that may come through the canopy, the understory that grows, your predators, your prey, your flora, your fungi, your fauna, but also the things that a human and our human participation may echo. So, for example, within the category of order, you may find something that is like a predator in the jungle, but you may also find human traps, things that are not negatives just because they may kill or attack, but rather keep some kind of semblance of balance. And running through it are the colors associated with each, as well as a soup of math expressions and a breakdown of what is file structure of what is a mask. So that is its brow, its face, its edges, what kind of paint is splashed atop it, what protrudes outside of it, and then lists on lists on lists of just manual inputs, things that I have given it of myself. So this is
So it's been trained on a vast amount of your work.
a vast amount of my work, both my
shapes, colors, brush strokes, all of it.
all of it. And then along the way,
How far back does that go?
This is purely Luci. So everything that is Luci or what has been created connected to Luci in the process of making this. And what you're seeing unfurl here is it is right now I'm letting it run. So what you're seeing is the generation of a mask. And right here where you see kind of this chroma key is where a protruding element will be surfaced and generated from the hundreds that I've created, and then be influenced by my poetry. And then it will cut that out from its green screen, much like a special effects house, and it will compile in select colors based on the emotion and feeling that I've associated with each one. And then it will sample and connect and start stitching together a mask. And this will create our initial generation. And this could run through again and again and again. But ultimately, what I found is that this is a nice way of just seeing, does a system work? But at basically every point along the way, what it is hit with at the very beginning is manual work. What it is hit with along the way is manual work. It enters into a conversation with a machine at different epochs and goes a little further. And at any point in the process where I need to say, I like a little bit of this, but I want to stop, I can rip it out and I can place it here and I can paint on top of it and put it back in. And so it's every one of the masks that you'll see in this collection is not a mask that is just like running through this. This is more proof of concept to show, yeah, you can make a generative system. To me, generative system is just, that's cool, it's novel, it's interesting, but like at the end of the day, I am a frame fucker. Like everything needs to be in its place. And so the masks that people are receiving are the masks that have been slowly stitched together through turning a few nodes into 10, bumping into what one mask maybe might work, but then the next it fails at. And needing to make it so that every path that could possibly be cleared to make the masks that are as rigid to its form and as slippery off of it, all within my world are possible. And so the end.
So does that mean though that of the 613 that are going to be the final collection, you still had put your fingerprints on all of them?
My fingerprints are probably on a few thousand masks. And I have made more than the collection over the last 17 months because a part of the system of this participation is rather than people hit a random number generator and get a mask, I am taking in all of their observations and the mask you receive, where it is in the jungle, what it represents within it, is not accidental. It's not arbitrary. It's not opening a Pokemon card pack and hoping it's a Charizard. It's, well, actually, it's almost like a meritocratic Pokemon card pack. And what you receive is, for me, giving you a link between us. It is, I see your words. I see what you've given me of all of the masks that I've made, of all of the feeling that is associated with each one. This is what belongs best with you.
Is that scripted or is that, again, by hand?
It is by hand, and I also have a system that assists in this process to help me categorize and surface based on the feeling that is evoked by each observation. But a part of making these tools is also to do something that I could never do in the past. It's if I wanted to go one by one, much like I did in the skulls, and make a bunch of masks, I could do that. But I wanted to be able to, as much as I spent 17 months observing the people around me, this ecosystem, this human jungle of the best of us, the most degenerative of us, my friends and enemies alike, all of this, and making masks that are inspired by those behaviors. The reality is, like, human beings are just very complex. And as much as I would love to say that I have perfectly made a box for every single one, there's going to be behaviors that surprise me, that surface. And so making this means, as the Masquerade unfolds, for the things that really surprise me or that conjures out something that even in this creation, even in all the time thinking and writing and making all the different ones that I didn't expect, I can make new ones. And so what I jettison, what I let go of, they're things that I care about. I've put so much into creating this engine that can work in tandem with me just to understand a single object in my world, these masks. But at the end of the day, the one that I pick for each person is, I don't take the energy given, the written energy, much as you gave to the monument game, lightly. And for me, it's only a shame that I didn't get to do that for you then,
Right.
but perhaps we get to do that again now.
And so it sounds like you've designed a system that helps you on shape, texture, color, stroke, but also it sounds like decision-making process.
Yes.
And you're also comfortable to say, I don't want to give all of it to the machine.
Well, it can, but it's not the point. If all you care about is making AI art or generative art, if the tool that we've talked about is your primary interest, well, I built a tool and it can do that. It's a tool that if I were to pick this up and give it to someone else that doesn't know how to draw, paint, sculpt, write, or anything like that, it would be more or less useless to them. Mm-hmm. But even so, I like the fact that even though this is a fairly efficient tool, at every point, it is meant to be passed back and forth between me and it. It is an extension of it. If I had 1,000 studio assistants, I wouldn't just check out and, go on vacation and hope everything works. I would be in constant conversation and direction with them. And so when I'm in conversation with myself, it's a little crazier and more manic than maybe directing other people, but it is nonetheless something that I enjoy the act of coming in and out of it.
So did we create a mask while we were just talking?
Yes.
Is it still working, or is it?
I've stopped it for now so that we don't have the engine of my GPUs whirring to life. Right. But at the end of the day, what masks look like are like this. And each one, right now we're in the order category. Mm-hmm. But the end result are masks that can be as rigid to the form or a slip off of it as I could want, each inspired by one little bit, one person, one part of life, nature, beyond.
And to your point, you have thousands of these, so it allows you to have a curatorial effect on, when gets this because she wrote this.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And I guess the final question then, so you spent a lot of time building something that makes masks creative. How long before it can make the whole world?
So it can, but it can only in a way that is heavily controlled.
So the tool helped create that entire world.
Yeah, and that ultrasound that I painted of my daughter is the mother seat to the whole thing. So the brushwork that I painted that went into creating that while Rachel was still pregnant, a little bit of her touches every mask, it touches every character, it touches every blade of grass, every tree, every log. And so the pursuit of making these tools that started with the mask maker is I wanted to see, can I understand one tiny object in my world, this mask, and make it so that many people could have this. But what I learned in making that, I wanted to be able to take so that I could know, what does a Luci blade of grass look like? What does a Luci flower look like? Well, there's actually so many different kinds of flowers. I need to be able to make all of them. And the logs and the moss, the characters that are terrifying, the characters that are sweet, that are kind. And I wanted to also take some of the lessons that I learned from making something like that, where when I make a character over there, if I want to move an arm, I'm repainting more than just the arm. But now when I make a character here, which is a combination of drawing and painting and sculpture and training on all of my past, the act of making this becomes part of that training. And then if I hone it and refine it manually and paint and sculpt and dig back into it, well, then every bit of work that I put into understanding that, in the same way as I did the mask, it's like compound interest, right? It doesn't just go away. It doesn't live and die in that painting. I get to take it with me in the future. So everything built to create Masquerade is to not just put everything to make one still image. It's so that everything in the still image comes with me to whatever I may want to make next. And the more I make, the more I give myself to the network that I've created, as well as the network that everyone is part of. I view it as an escalatory process of human evolution. The more I give, the more it connects to others, the more they collide with it. It just starts smashing atoms together to make something more.